Welcome to For Better and For Game, the gaming channel dedicated to husbands and dads who still love to indulge in gaming but just don't have the time that they used to. Today, I'm going to be covering a topic that is extremely important to tackle, which is gaming addiction in children and taking accountability for it. As some of you may know, Microsoft and Epic Games were recently named in a lawsuit for causing video game addiction for a 13-year-old child identified as GD. As someone who grew up gaming throughout the 90s and early 2000s, this topic hits close to home. Back in those days, gaming was a completely different beast. Video games were still a pretty small industry, and the ESRB, which is the maturity rating system used in the US, was still in its infancy, only having been established in 1994. I remember all of the trips I took to Toys R Us where I would go straight to the gaming section to pick up the latest SmackDown or 007 game and have absolutely no problem buying them in cash while my mom was off somewhere else in the store picking out Christmas presents for my cousins and my brother. These games were rated M for mature or T for teen, and it was right there on the box. But my parents never paid much attention to that until the first SmackDown vs. Raw game was released in 2004. I'll never forget trying to buy that game because that was the first time that I found out what the ESRB was. I went to the counter as usual to buy it, and the cashier asked me if my mom was around. I explained to him that she was shopping around for toys for my brother and that she just sent me to get the game myself, as I've done in the past. He told me that he needed to see her before he can sell me the game, which I thought was a little bit weird, but I was 12 at the time, so I didn't really give it much thought. Once my mom was done shopping, we both went back to the gaming section, and the cashier went on to explain what the ESRB ratings are. After the conversation was over, my mom refused to buy me the game, and I remember complaining endlessly about how I had the previous wrestling games, as well as Grand Theft Auto 3, which was a way worse game sitting at home. Looking back, that was definitely a dumb thing to say, as all it did was get my M-rated games taken away from me. But I tell this story to illustrate just how different things were back then. Granted, my parents should have been a lot more vigilant on what kind of games I was playing. I should not have had Grand Theft Auto at age 12. But a lot of people didn't even know that the ESRB existed, and we didn't have as many parental controls available to us to monitor what games our children are playing. That brings me to this lawsuit, which is being brought forward by Casey and Thomas Dunn. It revolves around video game companies' alleged negligence when it comes to fighting video game addiction. I want to break down three main points that stick out to me in this lawsuit and talk through each one of them, because in all honesty, in my opinion, it all comes down to a failure on the part of the parents. Now, before I go on, I don't mean to disparage them or give the impression that I don't feel for the situation that they're going through, because it is a tough one. But I would like to put forward the case that this is mostly due to their own negligence and not that of Microsoft or Epic or any other gaming company. I want to start with which games are specifically mentioned in the lawsuit as the ones that GD is addicted to. And those games are Fortnite, Call of Duty, Battlefield, and Rainbow Six. Right off rip, 3 out of those 4 games are rated M and are not suitable for a 13-year-old child. We're no longer gaming on PlayStation 2s in 2001, where the ESRB was largely ignored and gaming consoles or computers didn't have adequate parental controls. This child should not have been playing these games, and there's no excuse for the parents not knowing that. Even Fortnite was arguably inappropriate, because that game is rated teen, and it's safe to assume that this child has been playing these games for longer than just a single year in order to reach the levels of addiction which are outlined throughout the rest of the suit. The second point I want to talk about is the amount of time GD spends playing games, which is 12 to 14 hours per day. Even back when I was growing up, screen time was already a big issue, especially for video games. Spending 12 to 14 hours per day doing anything is unhealthy. The lawsuit alleges that even with effort put forth by Casey and Thomas, GD still finds ways to put tons of hours into gaming by sneaking sessions in after they go to bed. In fact, it's so bad that GD suffers from things such as physical pain in his hands, depression, lack of interest in other hobbies, and bouts of rage and anger when games are taken away from him. This is to the point that Casey's afraid of him when she tries to get him to stop playing. I want to reiterate that this is a terrible situation for the entire family. The fact that GD suffers from withdrawal symptoms when games are taken away from him is sad to say the least. But this also reeks of parental negligence. Children do not go from playing 0 hours per day to 14 hours per day overnight. This is something that takes months or even years to develop. The suit mentions that GD plays games on his Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription on his Xbox Series X, as well as Android mobile phones and the Nintendo Switch. All of these avenues of gaming include parental control features to limit your children's playtime. These are tools that they should have made use of long before their son got to this point. And even if those tools didn't exist, this is a 13-year-old child. You as a parent need to be involved and alert enough to realize that your child is spending way too much time playing video games. Simply turning the console off after an hour or two and saying, hey, GD, that's all for today, that should be more than adequate. It may seem callous to say in light of the situation they're currently in, but it's just the truth. The third and final point I want to touch on is the damages that Casey and Thomas are alleging the gaming addiction has brought upon them. They state that GD spends upwards of $350 a month on gaming, on top of over $3,000 that he has spent on downloadable content for his games. The suit alleges, and I quote, as a result of GD's gaming addiction, which was proximately caused by each defendant's intentional, negligent, deceptive, fraudulent, willful, immoral, reckless, and unlawful acts, Casey and Thomas Dunn have experienced loss of society and companionship, and have been financially damaged due to GD's uncontrollable in-game spending. I'm sorry, but what? And just where does GD get all of this money to spend on his games? Does he work a full-time job that affords him the luxury of spending $7,000 a year on gaming? We're talking about a 13-year-old kid here, again. Just like with setting playtime limits, modern consoles like the Xbox Series X offer options to limit spending by account, and these limits can be easily applied by just a few clicks. It should have been easy for Thomas and Casey to stop any egregious spending whenever it first began using the available tools. If anyone has been negligent in this situation, again, it's them. Any money they've lost due to this situation is their own fault. I would understand if this was a one-time thing, like we've seen in instances on the App Store or the Google Play Store, where a child gets their hands on a parent's phone, somehow ends up spending hundreds of dollars. But this is not a one-time incident. This has happened over months and years. And again, at the risk of sounding callous, I mean, there's just no universe in which this situation occurs if they take action early on to curb this behavior. Yes, video games can be addictive. I'm not trying to completely just absolve the video game companies of this. I mean, we see things like loot boxes that are just predatory for younger gamers especially. And gaming disorder is even included in the International Classification of Diseases, and it's defined as a pattern of gaming behavior characterized by impaired control over gaming, increasing priority given to gaming over other activities to the extent that gaming takes precedence over other interests and daily activities, and continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences. So gaming addiction is a real thing, and anyone who plays video games should be mindful of the amount of time that they spend doing so, especially if it begins to affect other facets of their lives. In fact, that's what this whole channel is about. It's about balancing your gaming time with all of life's other obligations. I mean, the older you get and the more responsibilities you pick up, the more obligations you have, and the less time that you should be dedicating to gaming, just as that's natural. And we as adults, we have to keep our hobbies, gaming included, in check so that we can be functioning members of society. But when it comes to our children, it's our job to use every tool at our disposal, as well as our best judgments, to raise them in a way that they can enjoy gaming as only a small part of the rest of their lives. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one, and like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this.